Something was beneath our tree that morning, something none of us could wrap, and it changed all things. So, it was the winter my dad's job disappeared like breath on a cold window. He worked in this factory off I-40, this place that always smelled of hot metal and oil the few times we had to drive over there to bring him his lunch. He had those heavy gray shirts with his name stitched in red script, Mark, those little grease spots that never did come clean. The week before Thanksgiving, they closed down. Not see you in January, closed down. Closed. Crack of dawn phone call from his boss on a Friday, and by Monday his badge didn't work at the security gate. You know that quiet of a house when someone comes home in the middle of the day for a horrible reason? It has a shape. Like everything tightens an inch. Dad set his lunchbox on the counter and just scowled at it like it had spoken to insult him. Mom brought him tea he didn't touch. I kept looking at the clock like it would unspell the time. It didn't, of course. We're the kind of family who could stretch a Costco rotisserie chicken into 3 meals in normal times. I enjoy how my mom is a magician with a crockpot and half an onion. But this was excessive. We were buying groceries at strange times to catch the rot markdowns. Mom did double shifts at the clinic and would return home with those red marks around her nose from wearing a mask all day. Dad started mowing neighbor lawns in December, which made no sense, but I cut him some slack. My older brother Jesse did overtime stocking at the hardware store. He'd return home smelling of plywood and cold air. My younger sister, Zoe, created spa coupons for Mom's feet and was trying to sell me her old Halloween gum constantly. I told her gum has an expiration date. She told me so does everything. Money was this vibration in the air. You couldn't see it, but you could feel it shaking your bones. 2 weeks into December, the electric bill slid under the front door like a warning. Mom tilted it toward the window light, squinted at the number, and pinned it to the fridge anyway. "We'll manage," she said, and I believed her because I'm 26 now and still have the habit, but then I was 19 and believing was also a way of not crying in the kitchen. Then one night, we were sitting down to dinner, spaghetti, not much meat, plenty of hope, and Mom took this deep breath. The kind of breath you take when you know you need to slowly pull a Band-Aid off. "What if," she said, "this year we don't do presents?" Something in me flinched, like she had said, "Skip Christmas." I'm not the gifts person, really. I'm the sit with coffee and fuzzy socks and watch the lights blink person. But the way my dad's eyes wandered toward the bills on the counter, I could feel him already translating price tags in 2 hours. He didn't have a way to work. "Yeah," I said, too fast. "We don't need stuff. We'll do things like pancakes and movies. Pajama day. The essentials." "Are you sure?" Zoe peered over her bowl. "Because Santa is. Santa is on a budget this year," Jesse cut in, trying to be lighthearted, but his smile was crooked. Dad coughed. "We got each other," he said. His voice did this wobble I'll never forget, like a tightrope someone had just stepped onto. We clinked forks to that. No presents. Just us. Here's the part where I make you suspicious, because I was. The days immediately after that conversation were off. Not bad, just a little wrong, like a picture frame hung crooked. Dad started waking up even earlier than his already early. I'd stumble into the kitchen at 6 to make coffee for my shift at the cafe, and he'd be tugging on boots, reeking of the garage. He'd say, "All right, kiddo," and squeeze my shoulder, his eyes too bright. "What are you even doing out there?" I asked one morning, half joking. "It's like 12 degrees. There's nothing to mow." He shrugged. "Tinkering." He'd always been a tinkerer. He could fix anything that wasn't digital. But this wasn't a casual kind of tinkering. He had that hunted look, the one I'd seen on him when the car transmission died 2 summers ago. Mom was behaving oddly, too. She started bringing home these crunchy brown paper bags with the tops folded over. I caught her once, tucking them subtly into the pantry behind the cereal boxes. "Where'd those come from?" I asked, attempting to sound curious instead of on the verge of tears. "Discount bag at Kroger," she said, too quickly. Which is what you do when a bag came from the church pantry and you don't want your 19-year-old trying to feel responsible for that. I didn't push it. Later, I found a tiny card tucked in one of the bags. Someone had placed it there, "Blessings in this season," in a gentle, looping handwriting. I changed it and closed the pantry very softly as though the blessing would fall out if I closed it hard. Jesse was oddly careful around me. He'd come home late, eyes rimmed red from the cold, and sit on the stairs for a minute, taking off his boots like an old man. "You're good," he'd ask, and not wait for my answer, like he didn't want to hear anything but yeah. And it was small, but I noticed that Mom had started placing her phone face down all the time. I did walk in on my parents in their bedroom talking in those quiet, intimate tones that your stomach just drops at because you feel like everything you depend on is suddenly going to change. I heard the word orientation. I heard 26th. And then silence. I had to open the door. Instead, I invented a reason to go to the laundry room and fold towels according to color because control is cozy and piles on a shelf. I plotted, even though we'd said no presents. It didn't feel like shopping, it felt like evidence. Proof that we could still do holidays, that we didn't need money to admit what we were too afraid to say out loud. I dug into my craft box, which is no more than an old shoebox full of yarn tangles and washi tape and dried out glue sticks. I wrote them each a letter with sentences that sounded like me at my most myself. Messy, sincere, occasionally funny, and a little too long. I printed pictures at the CVS kiosk because 10 cents appeared to be a price I could swallow. Dad in the driveway teaching me to back into a parking space using the trash cans. Mom falling asleep at the end of It's a Wonderful Life. Jessie with a flour-covered nose from Thanksgiving pie. And Zoe in a Halloween vampire cape, smiling with candy stuck to her lip. I found a string of dead white Christmas lights and rescued the little wooden clothespins. I sanded off the splinters, painted their names on each clothespin, and strung the pictures along a piece of twine tied in a heartbeat knot. It was nothing, really, but my hands had something to do besides worry. I also melted the tips of 3 burnt candles into an empty jelly jar and put in a cinnamon stick because the internet said that's what makes your house smell like you cleaned. Late on the 23rd, I snuck into the living room when everyone was asleep, my socks sliding across the hardwood, my breath making tiny ghosts. The tree was the skinny, tall thing we got for nothing from a lot at the end of the night. It was tilting towards the window like it was trying to eavesdrop on the neighborhood. I slid my letters, which were tied with a ribbon from an old birthday, under the lowest branch and just stood there for a moment like I'd just pulled off something innocent. Christmas Eve, the air was nipped and the sky was low with maybe snow. We did our tradition of baking Christmas Eve sugar cookies that are always brown since we leave them in the oven while we fight about Die Hard being a Christmas movie. Dad and I retrieved the mixing bowls while Mom pretended not to be enjoying the fight. I'm just saying, Dad said, small clouds of flour in the air like glitter. There's a Christmas party. There's winter. There's red and green. By that logic, any movie that shows a coat is a Christmas movie, I said, and he laughed, this wonderful free laugh that I hadn't heard in a month, and it made me kind of want to cry. I pretended to be really focused on cracking the eggs. Zoe frosted a cookie in the shape of a snowman and named him Mr. Fats because kids are both mean and cute. She put a sweater on him made out of frosting and said we had to save him for Santa. We did not save Mr. Fats for Santa. Jessie ate him at midnight while watching YouTube and saying so good like in an advertisement. I couldn't shake the sense that we were playing Christmas like a game we used to know. We watched It's a Wonderful Life and I kept looking at my parents' faces in the odd blue TV light, trying to read them. I heard them whispering late again. Do we tell them? Mom whispered. We tell them later, Dad said, and my heart rattled against my ribcage. Sure, suddenly they were talking about divorce, one of them moving out, me having to split my life into more pieces than the quarters I fed into the laundromat in college. I slept with clenched fists on top of the blankets, as if bracing for impact. I woke up early that morning because the house had that anxious quietness. We always had Christmas morning routines. No one wakes anyone up before 7, coffee is made prior to anything, and whoever wakes up first turns the tree lights on. I crept in and plugged in the old strand. Half of them twinkled, half shone steady, like a choir with some people on key and some on vibe. The living room smelled of the pot of orange peels and cinnamon sticks Mom had simmered on the stove, pungent, sweet, slightly artificial, but in a comforting way. In spite of our pact, there were things under the tree. Not boxes with bows, little things. Bundles wrapped in newspaper with yarn around them. A flat object that looked like cardboard. A jar with a red-painted lid. And my letters, which looked more obtrusive in the daylight as though they were waving their hands. Zoe ripped through the hall like a herd of small buffalo. It's time. It's time. We said no presents, but there's stuff. She was wearing her penguin pajamas, hair wild, face gleaming. Jessie lurched in, hair tousled, sweatpants, yawning like a lion. Mom and Dad followed, already in coffee-drinking mode. We sat on the carpet, legs crossed, and looked at one another like we were going to confess. Dad laughed and shook his head. So we're all liars, he said, smiling at us fondly. Zoe went first because she is the sun, and you can't keep the sun waiting. She pulled out 4 pieces of construction paper, edges wavy from having been under her pillow, covered with stickers and too much tape. Those are for each of you, she said, suddenly shy. Coupons. You can use them any time, but not for bad things. She handed me one. Free nail painting, it said in her spiky handwriting. Also hair braiding, but maybe not great. Mom said unlimited hugs, no expiration. Dad said, I will watch football with you without complaining. Jesse said, I will help you in the garage unless spiders. We laughed and tried not to cry. Mom leaned forward and hugged her so hard Zoe yelped. Okay, Jesse said, clearing his throat, red-faced. He pulled out a manila envelope you could tell he'd wrestled with a dozen times. I made songs. He held up a CD, a real one, with a sharp labeled title, Home Songs. It's just me and my guitar on voice memo only, but you know. He rubbed the back of his neck. There's one for each of you. Don't roast me. We didn't. He'd printed the lyrics on printer paper with little doodles in the margins. Mom's had a coffee cup. Dad's had a wrench. Mine had a little microphone because I sing in the shower, and Zoe's had a vampire cape because she'd never outgrown the costume. Mom opened a flat, neatly wrapped package. It was a recipe book she'd been putting together, written by hand, with stains on the pages already, because that's how you know a recipe is real. She had good handwriting, surprisingly. She'd included Grandma's pound cake, my aunt's enchiladas, and a page that just said how to stretch leftovers and not hate life. She had tabs and everything. I want you to have our food, she said, voice thick. If I'm not here, you can make us. Dad got up and went over to the tree, where he picked up a small wooden box I hadn't seen, the kind with a hinge and a small clasp. It had been sanded and smelled of sawdust and vanilla. He opened it, and inside were wooden ornaments, one for each of us. They were crudely cut, each one different. Mine was a tiny microphone with a bent cord. Mom's was a coffee mug with steam carved in wavy lines. Jesse's was a guitar. Zoe's was a no-brainer, a bat. He'd burned our initials into the backs. He handed mine to me, his fingers closing warm around mine. It's from the old fence, he said low. The cedar. I thought it might be something else, as the wind got half of it anyway. I pulled out my letters, face hot. Okay, so I wrote stuff. My mouth went dry. I mean letters. To each of you. And, a photo thing. I lifted up the twine with the clothespins and photos, the little line of our faces dangling like proof we'd been here, together, over time, laughing and burning the cookies and getting through. You can hang it. Or not. I won't be offended. We opened. We cried. It sounds corny, but it wasn't. It was human and messy and exactly what I needed, that feeling of words and wood and paper being more than themselves. We were all unwrapping pieces of each other. For a second, I felt it settle, peace, in my chest like a bird that had finally found a branch to land on. Then Dad cleared his throat again, but when he looked at Mom this time, the silence returned in a different shape. He said, I have one more thing. He rooted around under the couch like a magician and came up with a spiral calendar and a thick binder. The calendar had big squares, and he'd circled the 26th in red. I got a job, he said, and time hiccuped. It's a long haul. Trucking. They're looking for drivers. Orientation's the 26th. I leave tomorrow morning for training. The words slapped the room like a cold wind. Zoe went absolutely still. Jessie blinked hard as though a cut in a movie had been missed. My mom turned to him, and her eyes contained love and fear and something like relief that the telling was finally done. I could feel my body trying to do two opposing things, push him away and grab him. The suspicion that I'd been harboring came to the forefront, taking a form that I did not like. Why didn't you say anything? My voice, I believe I heard it, and it was small, tinny. He swallowed, throat convulsing. Didn't want to ruin this. He gestured at our little ridiculous circle. I wanted to give you this morning first. I didn't want you fretting, and I didn't want to. I don't know. I'm no good at. Mom put a hand on his back and faced me. It's 3 months at a time, she said to me. Then home. He'll be on the road. It's more money than anything else that's calling us back. We can catch up. We can breathe. My chest got tight like I couldn't breathe. The calendar in his hand felt like a threat, the circled day like a stop sign. I thought about rest stops and cold coffee and those green highway signs that tick off the miles to towns I've never been to. I thought about learning to back a car into a space by bumping the trash cans. I thought about his laugh in the cloud of flour last night, and this tear I hadn't noticed on his cheek now shining. Excuse me, I said, because sometimes you have to leave the room before you utter the thing you can't retract. I stood up so fast the room whirled, stepped over our handmade gifts, and moved to the front door. The outdoor air snapped harshly, but it helped. I was on the porch steps in pajama pants and Dad's old hoodie, my bare feet on the cold wood, which I would not recommend. The neighbor's inflatable snowman across the street tipped forward as though it, too, was tired from faking cheer. The world was quiet. Even the birds sounded hungover. I tried to be rational. This is good. A job. We need money. This is a solution. Yet my mind was a caged animal. He's going to leave you. He's going to leave. Tomorrow. How do you hold on to somebody who has to go? How do you do Christmas and pack a suitcase for your dad? What does it say that everything we weren't trying to be about money is now about mileage and per diems and schedules and safe return? The tears were a leak you can't find. I pressed my sleeve to my face and it was damp right away. Anger showed up, too, in its job as protector of the sadness. He says no gifts and then he gives us this? I said, half laughing in that not funny at all manner. Great. Cool. Thank you. And then right away, as though my innards couldn't stomach the ugliness, the other half of me replied, he made ornaments out of wood. He made something out of nothing. He's trying. My face hurts when I cry hard. My nostrils sting. I felt that way. And beneath it, this ache that felt like mourning for something that hadn't even occurred yet. I recalled little Zoe's coupons, her promises scrawled in marker. Jesse's shaky tunes on a phone in his bedroom at night when the rest of us were sleeping. Mom's neat script that read, add water if too thick. Our weird leftover life, tugged and divided. Dad's boots behind me on the porch were silent, the way big men walk when they don't want to scare you. He sat beside me but didn't touch me right away, which was thoughtful, as my skin was like a live wire. I know, he said, after a while. His voice was rough. It's a lot. I thought you were leaving, I said, and it came out like a confession and an accusation. Like, leaving. What? He turned to me, eyebrows lifted. Baby, no. He shook his head. No. This is so I don't have to work another way. This is so we get to keep this house. So the lights don't get shut off. So Mom doesn't have to work another shift. So Zoe can do her insane kid gymnastics without us having to choose between that and heat. So we're us. I shut my eyes, breathed out. I'm being dramatic, I said to him, even though I wanted to be dramatic forever, because it was causing the feeling to feel important. Nah, he said. You're being my kid. He waited, then he put his arm around my shoulders, warm and familiar, and I leaned into it like the porch had finally tipped me in the right direction. His coat was cold and his shoulder was warm, and he smelled of that cedar sawdust and coffee with too much sugar. It was ridiculous and perfect, that smell. I couldn't, he said, because I couldn't get it out without crying. I practiced. In the garage. I'd try to say I got a job and my throat would do that stupid thing. And I felt like I failed you. He took a deep breath. Like I failed at the plan where I left the house at 6 and came home at 5 and you knew where I was. You didn't fail, I said, automatic and honest. I wiped my sleeve across my face again and sniffed gross. You just changed the plan. We sat, letting the cold unscramble our brains. My feet numbed and then hurt and then numbed again. Inside, I could hear voices, muted, Mom and Jesse, possibly murmurs like waves. Zoe peered through the window at us, face pressed against the glass, breath forming a circle of mist. I waved at her and made a goofy face. She grinned, and I felt like I'd worked some kind of magic and pulled something out of thin air, a laugh. And it was something I could do. We went back inside. The living room had rearranged itself somewhat around the new knowledge, but was otherwise the same room. The tree leaned. The radiator crackled. Our presents, if that's the term you'd use, lay like small anchors on the carpet. I'm angry with you, I told Dad, because the truth matters. And I love you. It's both. He nodded, eyes bright. I can handle that. Mom got everybody's coffee refilled. She put her hand on Dad's back again and just left it there. Jesse gave me his lyric sheet for my song, and I read the first line and it said, there is a light that you plug in when it's dark, and I laughed, because that was so simple and so true. Then he said, rough and too casual, I can take him tomorrow if you need to sleep, and Dad said, no, I want you there, and I realized he'd said it to all of us. We all wore pajamas all day like a cliche we actually deserved. We ate pancakes with too much butter. We listened to Jesse's home songs as if he were famous and we were insiders. We hung the wooden ornaments on the tree and then on the window latch and then from the shelf, because they seemed like they ought to be everywhere. I helped Zoe write fine print on the backs of her coupons because she asked, what does conditions may apply mean? And I said, it means you can still say no sometimes. We argued over die hard again to feel normal. We played Uno until someone invented a new rule out of spite, and we all groaned. We stacked into the kitchen while Mom burned the first batch of pancakes and pretended she hadn't. And every now and then, I'd look up and see my dad looking at us with that look, the one that mixes pride and worry and love and a need to remember. It tempered my innards and softened them too. I handed out my letters at some point, humiliated, and made everybody promise not to read them out loud. Mom wept anyway. Dad read his quietly and then chuckled at the part where I'd said, "You always make the car smell like French fries, and that's both disgusting and comforting." He folded it and placed it carefully in his wallet, like money. That night, the house became still. Christmas always comes to where the day sighs and retreats, and night comes in, and you wish you could hold on to something you can't. I was in bed, eyes open, the calendar in my head, the red circle glowing like a brake light. I rose, went to the kitchen, made a list of what Dad would require on the road in spite of him obviously knowing. Hand warmers, a thermos, a heavy blanket, snacks that do not get weird, a picture of us. It was practical. It was love you can touch. I stepped into the garage and located his toolbox, the one bearing the sticker, "This is not a step," that he uses as a step. His hands had grasped it all over for years. His scent was on the workbench. A piece of cedar lay on it that he'd carved into something that looked like a bird wing, but maybe wasn't complete. I picked it up and wiped a bead of something off of it. It was honey-colored. He must have been down here late at night making us our ornaments, carving wood into us. When morning came, the 26th, it didn't feel like doom. It felt like something people do. We were wearing coats over pajamas. The driveway was crunchy with frost. Jessie was carrying Dad's bag. Zoe insisted I accept a glittery card she'd made that said "Drive Safe," with 3 exclamation points and a sticker of a vampire bat. Mom jammed a paper bag into his hands that definitely held too many sandwiches for one person. And I handed him the photo line, the twine and clothespins, and said, "You can hang it in the cab. Or not. I won't be offended." He smiled and said, "It'll make the whole thing a home." He hugged each of us differently, because he knows us that well, and then he hugged Mom like they had a secret, which they kind of did, which was just this: we had not broken. We were bending a lot, but we had not broken. He backed off, the truck rumbling down the street slowly, the sun shining cold light on the neighbor's half-deflated snowman. We waved until it was foolish, and then we waved some more because it didn't matter that it was foolish. I came in and sat in his chair. The house had rearranged itself in a manner I could endure. My heart did the skip that isn't panic, but the second after panic, when you go, okay, it's going to be so much, but we can do so much. I heard Jessie's song again. The bit about plugging in a light made me snort and sob at the same time. Here's what I learned, and I know this is something you'd cross-stitch on a pillow, but I mean it in the most real, messiest way. That morning, we all cheated on the no presents rule, and nobody spent any money. But we'd all made something with our hands, with our time, with our hope and terror mixed right in. And when Dad said he was leaving, I thought it was the opposite of a gift. I thought it was the taking away. But it wasn't. It was the gift that makes the other ones keep on occurring, lights on, heat running, pantry that rattles when you open it. It was him going, "I love you so much I will let you hate me for 3 minutes, and then I will drive." I still have the small wooden microphone ornament. It's on the plant shelf in my apartment now, dangling off a pot hose like it's going to sing a duet with a leaf. And every year, even when it got better, and then worse, and then weird, and then fine, because that's how it goes, we uphold the homemade rule. It keeps us honest. It keeps us close. It keeps us laughing. It keeps us saying, "I see you," with wood and yarn and paper and time. Family is not money. That's a sure thing, but when the bills stack up and you're counting your days in dollars, you can forget. Family is a hand on your shoulder on a cold porch. Family is a crayon coupon that says, "I'll help in less spiders." Family is a calendar with a red dot and somebody who doesn't want to tell you because they know you'll cry, and then you do, and then you pass the pancakes. So yeah, that was the Christmas without gifts. Except it wasn't. It was the Christmas with only gifts that mattered. In case you've had something similar happen to you, I'd be glad to get your thoughts in the comments. And if this tale moved you even a little bit, don't be shy to like, subscribe, and hit that bell.